Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Evil Empire. I'm your host, Evil Empire, and this week on the feature, it's Sublime Gearhulk. So this deck functions essentially like any other blue-black control deck, but it's packing a couple of really over-the-top endgames. And so let's go through both of the big endgame plans now. We'll talk about some of the overall choices in the deck, and we'll look at how this particular build might be different from some other ones that you've seen, a little bit more adapted to best of one, if that's possible. If it's possible to play a control deck in best of one, if it's possible to win very much with a control deck in best of one, it's been very difficult. So looking at the big plan of the deck in the end game, we're looking to get Torrential Gearhulk online, and ideally we'd like to pair that with a Sublime Epiphany in our graveyard. This nice lady who has cake on the brain. And ideally we can get that into the graveyard, but not necessarily by casting it, because that getting the 6 mana to do that in Historic is a little bit of a difficult ask. But rather we're trying to get it into the graveyard just either by flipping it over with Search for Azcanta, putting it directly in there, or maybe by discarding it to a Thirst for Knowledge, which is certainly a possibility if we're able to throw that into the graveyard that way. That's another way we can get it there. And then we'll flash it back with Torrential Gearhulk and absolutely wreck our opponent. And we'll also get to make a copy of Torrential Gearhulk if we successfully pull this off. And that will then allow us to make to cast another instant or sorcery from our graveyard if we wish to. So we have to have another one in there, obviously, but still, that's kind of crazy. And then we'll have, 10 power, 12 toughness on the board, in addition to having countered their spell. So that's kind of the big plan, if we can actually pull that off, which I don't think we'll do, but we'll see. And then another possible endgame that this deck has in the list of possible options, I guess, is Narset plus Commit to Memory. The memory side of this card allows us to basically force our opponent to shuffle their graveyard into their library, and then along with their hand, and then instead of drawing 7 cards like they would normally with memory, they draw 1 card because we'll have Narset out. That's the idea there, is that we'll be giving them the Narset lock and then also forcing them to wheel their hand and not necessarily have very much fun doing that the way that we will. So it's a little bit of a surprise finish for the opponent. Now, there are some other possible wins in the deck, like the Scarab God is still good enough just to take over the game if you're able to establish this with a pretty clean board, and then just start exiling creatures out of your opponent's graveyard and making 4/4s with them. They tend not to like that very much. Mid-range and aggro opponents really dislike that a lot. Now, sometimes against a control opponent, you will not really have much to hit with the Scarab God's ability, although Uro is pretty omnipresent in the format, and so having a little bit of counterplay against Uro allows this to make sense main deck, I think. Then filling out the rest of the cards in the deck, we have pretty much your standard blue-black control suite. So we got some point removal in terms of Braska's Contempt, Fatal Push, Heartless Act. We've got some counters. In our counter suite, we have Jawari Disruption, which is also a land. Nice that Narset can grab lands now. A couple of Essence Scatter, a trio of Disallow, which is one of our best targets with the Torrential Gearhulk. And then rest of our interaction, we have 2 Shark Typhoon to kind of get on the board and mess up their blocking and attacking situation a little bit. An Extinction Event as a one-of. I find that this card is not very good in best of one because opponents that are aggro often play 1-drop, 2-drop. And so right there you've got a problem in the sense that Extinction Event's not going to necessarily sweep boards very cleanly in an aggro-centric best of one meta. So I've really preferred Languish as opposed to Extinction Event. And then we've got 1 Salundi Vision as another land that Narset can get primarily. And then we've got our 3 Mind Stone to get us closer to our Sublime Epiphany and Torrential Gearhulk a little bit more quickly, make that a turn 5 reality for us. And then filling out the rest of the mana base, we have a little bit of a change from the list that Gregor Kowalski shared. Ulrich, as he's known on Twitter, shared this list as he was, I guess, kind of messing with people and saying that this was a tier 1 deck in Historic, which it most certainly is not. But when he shared the list and people got it from him, I had 4 4 fetid pools and 4 Fable Passage. I cut one each of those and put in a pair of Drowned Catacombs to try to make the mana a little bit more workable. And I also found that having 4 Fatal Passage was just a little bit, Fabled Passage rather, was just a little bit much with only having 4 basics in the deck. So that's my tuning that I've done of this deck. And I've actually been surprised with how often I can pull off one of the 2 big endgames that I mentioned. And even if I'm not pulling off those endgames, I find that either sweeping the board enough or just getting Torrential Gearhulks on the board and beating down with those is been pretty effective more frequently than I thought with this particular deck. Although at the last time I checked, I think I had about a 43% win rate with the deck through about 80 games of best of 1. So it's definitely not something that you should expect to win with right away. It's going to take some time to master the deck, and I don't think I'm anywhere close to mastery. I probably have like another 200 games to go, which I may or may not get to. But anyway, this is a kind of a new player on the block since Kaladesh Remastered. It's obviously built around one of the cards from Kaladesh Remastered, Torrential Gearhulk. And so we're going to take it for a spin in the Historic Best of 1 queue Platinum rank, as usual. And we'll see you there. All right, yeah, we've got 3 lands and a Mind Stone. I mean, we'll keep it. We don't have a lot of interaction, but hopefully draw some of that. All right, this will give us the most options in terms of color of mana. All right, that feels bad. We are definitely going to struggle with that. Let's go ahead and pay the 3 to play Mind Stone. Accelerate a little bit. That way we'll have Disallow up as well, which we wouldn't have had unless we, commit to no plays on turn 2. Which you don't necessarily want to do in Historic. I mean, you want to have some kind of play on turn 2, I think, considering that it's like a turn 4 format. Alright, so what's the opponent got on 3? Got a Croxa maybe? No, they shock in. Okay. The attack goes through, not a problem. Okay, so Croxa is the thing. What do we discard? Probably the Narset, right? Too slow. Okay. In that case, we'll go grab a second black source. And we'll make a baby shark. I feel like this turn was just very badly played by me. Like if you know they're going to play Croxa, then just block the Archfiends, Okay, hitting a land is good. Interesting. Do we threaten the block? I don't know. I don't know that we do actually threaten the block. So if they had Claim Fame, they would have played it last turn on Croxa. But I think we just get in here and then we'll hold up Fatal Push and commit. But I don't think we're using the Fatal Push on their Archfiends. Not necessarily. It would be funny to disallow that, but I think it's a waste of a disallow. think there are situations where it's good to disallow the Fabled Passage activation, but that was not one of them. Okay, yeah, that's fine. You want to use that on that? Sure. I think we hang on to the Fatal Push because it's going to let us kill their Kroxa really easily, which would feel good. Yeah, we might as well disallow that. Alright, now they know we have the push, which feels bad. Alright, that wasn't a land. That also feels bad. We really wanted it badly for that to be a land. That's one problem with this deck is, like, it just does not have enough lands for a control deck. I think it has about 26, including the double-faced cards, maybe 27 counting the double-faced cards, which is just not enough. Boy, we are really getting creamed here, huh? Okay, Lurrus to hand. And that's it. Interesting. I think we commit the Archfiends. Just get this done with. Do they have the other village rights in hand? We're about to find out. They do not. Okay. It's not nothing, but it's not great either. Okay, Spikefield Hazard Face feels like they're trying to fuel Lurrus. Need to get one more, or sorry, not Lurrus, Kroxa. Need to get one more card in the yard for Kroxa, but they can play it out with Lurrus here. Make us discard something. Which is probably going to be Fatal Push, unfortunately. Or maybe one of the Gearhulks, yeah. Probably one of the Gearhulks would be better. Alright, submit one of the Gearhulks. Resolve that. Okay, we did get our land, so let's just play that out even if it's tapped. Languish away the Lurrus. They're going to bring back Kroxa. We're going to kill it. Unfortunately, we tapped our mana wrong, so we can't kill it the way we want to, but... Auto tapper strikes again. Tap your mana carefully, people. This could cost me the game pretty easily here. Alright, well, they were going to have village rights up anyway, I think. So. Well, we're going to have the push in the yard, so I guess just, like, you know, have a 4/6 also randomly. Sounds good. Alright, so we use Fatal Push to kill Kroxa here. Okay, got Kroxa. Kroxa down, confirmed. And they've got a kill spell, it looks like. Is it a... Yeah, Spark Harvest. Darn it. Claim back the Archfiends. They get a 5/5. That's probably the game. Unless we draw exactly Heartless Act or Fatal Push off the top. Okay, Typhoon's not nothing, but it's not great either. It keeps us alive for exactly one turn. We might as well play this out, like, whatever. You know, a 3-3, fine. But that only keeps us alive for one turn. And if they have Fatal Push, we're just dead. Which is a card that is almost certainly in their deck. Yeah, looks like they have it. Oh, Obi Devil? Sure, same deal. Alright, that's game. Yeah. None of the good black interaction, but we'll get there. It's a functional hand, so we'll take it. I think we're going to want to lead on Fetid Pools because we're not going to cycle it on 2. We're just going to hold up Essence Scatter on 2. Okay, we're playing against Team Marvel. So our life total really doesn't matter. Against them, they're not really going to pressure it. Now we can hold up the Fetid Pools cycling along with the Essence Scatter. Okay, so they're going to attune with Ether. Next turn is really the one where we have to have a counterspell up in terms of we need to be able to defend against their Marvel. Yeah, we have to have hard counter from now on, which is going to be tough. Okay, well, it just got a little bit easier. Let's just play a Clearwater Pathway on blue. Yeah, I wish we could play an Narset, but I don't think they would have kept the starting hand unless it had the Marvel in it. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so they top. Maybe it's the land they need to play Marvel without having to... Yeah, but then they don't have the energy, right? That's the problem for them right now. Whirl, okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that technically goes in the deck, but it's one of the worst cards in the deck. Okay, and Breeding Pool tapped and say go. Pay the life. Pass the turn. We can't really play can't really play our Shark Typhoon or our Heartless Act. We need to keep up Disallow here. Okay, if that's what they're gonna do, then we can kill this, and it's not really a problem. Then we say yes to this. They go ahead and attune some Ether. And now they're holding up Marvel for their next turn with activation ready. Okay, so we go to 5 mana. Wish that we could play Scarab God by tapping out with 5, but we're just going to pass with Disallow. And Shark Typhoon up. Seems fine. They're trying to bait us out, obviously. So we're just going to cycle the Typhoon for 3 end of turn. And that'll deter their little mini aggressive attacks with Servant. And we won't be attacking with it, unfortunately. which is how we like to attack with our sharks. That's the best way to have sharks. This deck, I find more than any other, just does not really play out the Shark Typhoon, like the 6 mana enchantment half of it. Okay, well that's completely fine, obviously. Alright, so now we've got double disallow. Tempting to play out Narset and pass with just one disallow up, because that's really all we need is one disallow. So let's do that. We'll activate Narset.
Cannot perceive beyond the veil of reality. Put thoughtfulness before action.
Yeah, we'll grab a commit. Hopefully get to use that next turn. Actually, no, we won't get to use that next turn because it has to be used from the graveyard, but maybe turn after next if somehow our Narset survives. Okay. So Narset to 1.
You cannot see your folly.
We need to hit a land pretty badly here. Feels like that's always the case with this deck. Just so badly needs to hit its land drops. Alright, so now we find out if opponent is packing counter magic, which they almost certainly are not. Grab a swamp with our Fabled Passage. Disallow this. Yeah, they are not packing any type of interaction. Alright, so I think we have to just leave commit up. And maybe we'll have to let Narset die here, which is unfortunate. Yeah, I think the play is just let her go, right? Because we can't let them resolve Marvel.
I still have much to learn.
Okay, well at least we have Extinction Event for this, so they are gonna draw a card off of it. But Extinction Event on even takes care of this issue. Although Languish notably does not. Yep, they're gonna get a card off of it. But we are gonna keep up Disallow on their next turn. So we're gonna name even here. And take out the Conduit Servant as well as Niv-Mizzet Parun, which is kind of an odd choice. Odd choice in this deck is the Niv-Mizzet Parun. But, you know, technically, you can play that. Yeah, we obviously have to let Servant. Servant has to resolve here. The Puzzle Knot also has to resolve here. Alright, so Fatal Push is a pretty good draw for a turn. Wish we had one more mana to be able to play out Scarab God. But I think we just pass the turn this way. And we'll see what they have for us. Okay, so they've tapped the Servant, which means they can no longer use it to produce mana. So it will go the way of the dinosaurs now, with Fatal Push targeting Servant. Because with us being at 9 at this point, we basically really have to defend our life total. Okay. Okay, so there's the Gearhulk. That's exactly the card that we want. So now we can do some things. Yeah, the Attune with Ether is gonna resolve here. We're gonna save our counters for the things that really matter. Okay, come on, give us one more mana. Yes, okay. So now we'll resolve Scarab God. Or we'll attempt to. Okay, here we go. Alright, hold on to your... Okay, that was it. That was it. Yeah, threatening all those activations on their graveyard next turn. Definitely not something the opponent wants to sit there through. And we were going to be able to hold up commit through one activation with our 8 mana, so... Nice victory there. Feels good. Yeah, Sublime Epiphany, not really what you want to see in your opener, but Languish definitely is. So I guess we'll keep it on the strength of the Languish and hope that we manage to live that long. Yeah, okay, we're probably not going to live that long. Alright, so what's the play? I think we Watery Grave tapped. I think that's the play here. And then hold up the Fetid Pool's cycling ability on turn 2. Or maybe use Search for Escanta next turn, I don't know. Okay, so they are on track for turn 3 Muxus if they wish to. In all likelihood, they're going to hold back from that a little bit, and maybe they'll commit to a turn 4 Muxus. I think we search for Escanta versus holding up the Fetid Pool's activation. Alright, so are we going to get Muxused? No. But we are going to take 16 damage over the next 2 turns. So we're basically dead to a Stiff Breeze at this point. I mean, it would have been nice last turn, but now it's a graveyard. Okay, that's something. That's definitely better than the Sharp Stick in the Eye. So let's let them think that they're going to have their Goblin Chieftain up until the very moment when they don't have it anymore. Pre-combat. So when they move to combat before they declare attackers, we have to use it. Yep. Right here. Point it at Goblin Chieftain. This makes it a little awkward for them to try to make mana with it. Alright, well they had the cycling ability in hand, so not as awkward then. Okay, so we need to sweep the board next turn, and then we need them to really not have much in hand at all. We already have commit. Let's just graveyard it. Okay, so pathway on blue. Languish. They can make 4 mana if they wish. They do have another Gem Palm. Interesting. Okay, so they're going to point that at their Prospector for some reason. Oh, but they're going to decline. Okay. Yeah, makes sense now. Look, these are going to have to go one way or another. 3 Gem Palm Incinerators. Okay. See how it is. Yeah, but see, the thing is, we have a way to deal with that. Let's graveyard it. Good. Okay, we need to make land drop return for sure. And then we're just going to have to do this right now because there's no point in letting them untap with it. Alright, so they're on 5 now, which means they can't quite Muxus yet. But they can next turn when we have some counter magic up. Okay, now we do want this to put our Sublime Epiphany up. All right, we've got them right where we want them. I mean, this is about as good as it can go against goblins. This is their worst possible draw. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the only time that you beat goblins is just when they have nothing, when they have the stone nothing. Because really, I mean, goblins beats this deck most other times. So you've seen a real rarity there. And we're back with Sublime Gearhulk. So the deck has performed about at expectations for a control deck like this in Best of One. I know when Ulrich tweeted out the deck in the week or two that was following the release of Kaladesh Remastered, he was probably talking about it being, good in kind of a meme-tastic way, trying to draw attention to the deck. But I think it does have some interesting things going for it. I also heard Brian Gottlieb on the Arena Decklist podcast talking about the deck in favorable terms because it has a little bit more of black mana in it and doing some little bit over the top things in a couple of different ways, and it even has like a plan C and a plan D if things go bad. You've got obviously your two big game plans. A and B are like trying to get some combination of Sublime Epiphany with Torrential Gearhulk or Commit to Memory with Narset. But if you can't pull that off, you have other plans in the deck. You can kill them with Sharks. The Scarab God can just take over a game. That's a card that really hasn't been fully explored in Historic yet. But against the right opponent, it can shut down an Uro. It can shut down any kind of graveyard shenanigans that your opponent might want to get up to. And it can just really take over a game if you establish it against like a mono red, for example. They're not going to be able to take out an army of 4/4s that the Scarab God is going to create. So that's a viable backup plan to your other win conditions. And I think in the meantime, the deck just does a pretty good job with Fatal Push, with Heartless Act, with Extinction Event, Languish, and Vraska's Contempt, along with your counter spell suite. Deck does a pretty good job of just holding down the board and making sure that things don't get too overcrowded. So I think this is a very legitimate player in Historic. I think I'd probably slot into the B tier at this point. Solidly a tier 2 deck, but one that could maybe someday with a little bit of more tuning, more expert tuning than certainly someone like me can provide. But a little bit more tuning, a little bit of a pickup here and there from some of the new sets. I'm thinking of maybe getting cards like something like a Hero's Downfall from Theros, if that ever, from original Theros, if that ever enters the format. Getting a few pickups here and there. This deck might be able to compete a little bit more on a tier 1 or A tier level. So something to keep your eye on, and definitely a new player in the format with the arrival of Kaladesh Remastered. The Scarab God finding a really convenient home here. And I think as a one-of in Best of One, the Scarab God is really powerful. I don't think you really want to go much beyond a 2-of. Another card the Scarab God maybe a max of 2-of. Scarab God, rather, max of 2-of. And then another card that I would consider adding a second one of is Search for Azcanta. We saw it in that last Goblins game, but just in general, the card, when it comes down, gives you a great deal of selection. Letting you flip the top card of your library into your graveyard is a huge deal in this deck in particular, because we're looking to play out of our graveyard with Torrential Gearhulk. So something also I considered adding more of. And then as far as cards that I consider cutting, I'm not sure. I feel like the deck has a lot of room to cut. I think one of the places I would look to cut first is with the counter suite. I've not been particularly happy with Essence Scatter and Jawari Disruption. So maybe you could think about changing those out for either different counter spells like Negate or maybe a Mystical Dispute, something like that. But in any event, I think the double-faced cards do play a certain role in the deck, because it is just incredibly huge deal that Narset can now get lands. I just can't tell you how many times I've wanted to be able to hit a land off of Narset and just couldn't quite do it. Even a tap land, to be honest with you, just to hit that land drop is such a big deal in this deck. And I think overall the mana in the deck is where I would look to make the most improvement. Definitely want to include some double-faced cards, but it's a question of, do you want to go Jawari Disruption with Cylinder Vision, or do you want to maybe go with Hydra Mauling? I mean, I've been pretty happy with Haggard Mauling in other decks, but I haven't tried it out in this one yet, so that's another avenue you could take if you wanted to try to tune the deck, maybe improve it a little bit. But I feel like the core combos you should try to keep in place as much as possible. I know Sublime Epiphany feels like a weird card. Feels like kind of a standard only excuse me, feels like kind of a standard only card that's making an appearance here in Historic, but I genuinely think that you can pull this off as a fair card. Even just hitting 2 or 3 of the modes is pretty big. And overall, when you do get this into the graveyard and you are able to threaten Torrential Gearhulk with it, the way it combos and the way it makes a copy of Torrential Gearhulk getting you another spell, even though that was something we didn't get to see in this particular video, it is something I've pulled off, and it's just game breaking. It's a really huge play, being able to put that much power and toughness onto the board all of a sudden, and it kind of is as if those 2 creatures have haste because they're going to turn around the next turn and attack right away. You're playing them on your opponent's turn with flash. So just a really huge combo. I think that's something that's very much for real in this deck, along with the commit to memory Narset thing, which has been around in Historic for a long time, but I think it just really has happened more consistently than I thought it would in this deck in particular. So that is Sublime Gearhulk, the Historic featured deck of the week. And with that, Evil Empire signing off, and I hope you have a great rest of your week heading into the last month of 2020. Bye, everybody.